All right, Sean, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Actually, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm just going to dive right in here. Okay, folks. So as Sean told you, yes, absolutely, we were NEAF, the Center for College Planning. Our new name, Granite Advance, really is just a way to publicly show that we are here for everyone in New Hampshire, everyone seeking any sort of education after high school, and that is our main commitment. So you know that we have the student loan Edvest in You. Granite Advance is really just the community outreach that we do. So you will still see the same services. You will still see these same lovely faces that are on your screen now. Sean, if you want to go to the next slide. And one of the things that we've made available over the past probably year and a half now is that families can go right online to book an appointment with us. So you see our Calendly link there. You also have our phone number. And on the right, you have examples of the types of appointments that we offer. So we have expanded a little bit where we do a little bit more with career and aptitude exploration on the front end of things. But our bread and butter is still helping folks with that FAFSA, helping with financial aid letters, helping anyone who just needs it through this process, right? We understand how stressful this can be for families, and they are more than welcome to make an appointment for us to help them through any of it. We do in person on Tuesdays and Thursdays in our Concord office, but we have virtual appointments available every weekday. All right. So we're going to start with what we know and how the application has changed. Again, I'm going to go quickly through these first few slides because these are probably some of the things that you've heard already. To Sean's point, what we do know right now is that it will open by December 31st. I think that there was some confusion. People thought that it might be opening December 1st. All they really had given us was in December. So now they're telling us it will be open by the end of the month. We do know that it is going to be a shorter form. We do know that everybody who creates an account, so FSA ID, student aid account, same thing, that there is going to be a verification process on the back end of that. And we do know that everybody, whether they file taxes or not, will be signing off on consent for the Department of Ed to access their IRS data file for that tax year. So rather than typing tax information in, it's consent that's being given for them to access that tax information. Number of colleges has increased to 20. Please do not think that we are in any way telling students that they should be applying to 20 colleges. Our recommendations, I see Sean shaking her head, no, that is absolutely not what we are doing. But the form itself has changed and students can put up to 20 colleges on there now. One of the important things that we really want folks to realize is that the form really is going to be simpler. It's confusing this first year because there's new terminology, but really it's been separated out. So the student does their part, click submit. The parent does their part, click submit, and the FAFSA is done. So really it's a matter of helping the person in front of you, whether it's a student or whether it's a parent, to make sure they're getting their information in correctly and clicking submit at the end. All right. So formula changes, and certainly no need to get into math at lunchtime, but we'll just talk about some of the changes here. So EFC, expected family contribution, is now referred to as the SAI, Student Aid Index, which is just really a better name for what it is. And it is going to be calculated slightly differently, but instead of seeing terminology like EFC, you are going to see SAI. Actually, one of the things that we've seen in our office, Sean brought this to my attention this morning, is that students are now starting to receive acceptance letters from their colleges. And so sometimes in that acceptance letter, that they're using the terminology from last year because the financial aid office may not have switched over to the terminology for this year. So we have seen a little bit of confusion. If you're seeing EFC, it means SAI. They are going to be,
sorry, I jumped the gun.
It's okay. I'll be quick, I promise. The calculation will look a little bit different. They are now asking for family-owned businesses to talk about the net value. There will be some information about how to do that. They still will be asking about child support received, but the way it figures into the calculation is actually more beneficial for the family. Household size, they are now referring to as family size because it lines up with the taxes better. Number of dependents in college. This has been a big one this year. One of the formula changes is that the SAI will no longer take into account how many children one family has in college at the same time. It is still going to be asked on the form, which is why it can certainly be confusing. And there absolutely are colleges who do plan to take that into account. So know that it is not going to be reflected in the federal methodology and the way they calculate that SAI, but you still may see a benefit to having more than one child in college at the same time when you're getting a financial aid offer from the college. So the question will still be asked, and that information will go to the colleges, and they will do with it what they will. And with this new calculation, we are seeing, they have been showing us data that many, many more students will be eligible for federal Pell grants. Custodial parent is another one, and this is certainly one of the questions we get from counselors quite often. So there has been a change. We know that FAFSA always has just wanted to hear from one household, right? If the student has more than one household, it is no longer who the student resided with over the last 12 months, the majority of the time. It is now who financially supports that student the most and has over the last 12 months. The logical question there is, how do we figure that out, right? There will be a way to do that in the form itself. The parent wizard, I believe, is what they are calling it. And that will help families to determine which parent or parents should be putting their information into the FAFSA. And as Sean said, we do have a video, and we also have a handout that you are more than welcome to share with your family. So certainly they are for your benefit and to understand, but you also are more than welcome to pass along anything to your families. All right.
The other thing to keep in mind on this, I just want to mention real quick, Maura, is keep in mind that your student aid index or a family or student's student aid index can also be a negative number. Okay, so if you do see that on the form, don't panic. Don't let your students or families panic. That is normal, as it is part of that new Pell Grant formula.
Thank you, Sean. That is absolutely important. And so what we do know is that an SAI can be as low as negative 1,500, I believe. But again, for our purposes, for your purposes, just pretend a negative number is a 0. So really, it is nothing you have to worry about on the front end, and it does not mean that the FAFSA was done incorrectly if you are seeing a negative number. Thank you for that. So really quickly, again, just a recap of the terminology that has changed, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Sean to kind of walk through what the screens are going to look like when filing a FAFSA. So again, expected contribution, student aid index. Household size will now be talked about as family size, for which parent goes on the FAFSA. Really, instead of saying parent, you might see them referred to as contributors in some cases. If a student is married, a spouse becomes a contributor. They want contributor information to the FAFSA. So we will talk about that, but for most of these situations, the people who would be considered contributors would be parents, because we're mostly certainly talking about dependent students here. When I started this job 14 years ago, it was father and mother, and then it went to parent 1 and parent 2 on the FAFSA, and now it is parent and other parent. So that is in terms of just who's putting information on the FAFSA. The student aid report, which is something that you folks certainly might deal with local scholarships and things like that. They always want to see the student aid report. It is now called the FAFSA submission summary, which really that's what it has been all along, right? So student aid report makes students think that they're, seeing decisions being made about how much aid they'll be getting, when really it is just a report of everything they just submitted. So that FAFSA submission summary. One of the things that also I want to mention, I'm sure Sean would be mentioning this as well, is that again, in this year of transition and change and kind of working out some of the tweaks in the FAFSA process, one of the things that we've learned is, although the FAFSA will open by the end of December, information from the FAFSA will not be received at colleges until the end of January. Okay, so anybody filling out a FAFSA before the end of January, they still will be able to do it, go through, click submit, but they're not going to get that FAFSA submission summary until the end of January. The college isn't going to receive the information until the end of January. And then if they need to go in and change anything, that will not be an option until after that FAFSA submission summary is received. So going forward after that, it'll certainly happen a lot more quickly. But for now, there will be some lag time of a few weeks before students could go back in and make some changes. Dependency status is essentially the same thing. Most students that you're working with are going to be considered dependent, with a few exceptions that will be considered independent. But when they ask the questions on the FAFSA, they're going to be asking about student personal circumstances, but that is basically the outcome of that is figuring out whether a student is considered dependent or independent. The IRS data retrieval tool is no longer part of the FAFSA. So again, instead, folks, whether or not they filed taxes, will be asked to consent to, again, the Department of Ed accessing their tax information for that tax year. So therefore, the government is going to be able to see whether or not they file taxes. So there will be less verification of that tax information going forward. So again, these changes are all definitely for the best. It's just a matter of this transition year and getting used to how things are being phrased. All right, Sean, back to you.
All right, so let's look at the FAFSA and what it's going to look like next year and moving forward. We'll do a quick walkthrough. As you can see in the right-hand corner there, we will have to keep it as clean and as easy to read as possible. You'll see student sections, you'll see parent sections. We'll go through the student one first. We'll touch a little bit on the parent section, and then we'll talk about some scholarships towards the end. Okay, so the 24-25 FAFSA looks a little different. Okay, is, as Maura mentioned earlier, it is a role-based form. Okay, so when you go in, same thing, you'll still have to pick what your role is. Are you the student or are you the parent? Now, you can start it, it's somewhat the same as last year, right? If you're the parent, you can start it. If you're the student, you can start it. It's going to be very separate though. So if the student starts it, they'll finish their section and then send out a message to the parent. If the parent starts it, the parent can fill in majority of the information, but the student will still have to go in and do their section as well. Consent to the use of tax information, things like that. We'll talk about a little later on in this presentation, kind of what happens if a parent starts it to completion, if a student starts it to completion, what information is going to show for each of them. Okay, so the big thing when it comes to the tax information, as Maura mentioned, right? We're not using the data retrieval tool. We're not trying to input all of that information. We are doing a sharing of information with the IRS, right? So you are consenting, the student will have to consent, the parent will have to consent in order for a student to be eligible for federal student aid. You can see this picture. This is what, and again, these are all screenshots of what that new form is going to look like. And you can kind of see there, they are told what they are consenting to and why. You must consent to the use of tax information, and it does not matter if you've worked or not. right? So I've gotten the question for students, right? Students may have worked a little bit, right? But didn't meet the threshold to file taxes. Okay, that's okay. Some students don't work. You're still going to want to provide consent. I want the IRS telling me that Sean did not file taxes, nor was she required to. That is the information we're trying to bring into the FAFSA form. It is the same with a parent. If a parent does not file taxes, they still need to consent to the use of that information. Now, as you see in the little box to the bottom right corner there, if a student or if a parent is unwilling to provide information on the FAFSA, a student could be eligible for an unsubsidized loan. So as we are aware, all students are eligible for some type of loan by completing the FAFSA, right? Depending on if it's subsidized or unsubsidized, depends on that student aid index. Okay, and it depends on the school that they are looking to attend. But they do have the option to do that, to be eligible for a fully unsubsidized, remember, accrues interest when the student is in school, so unsubsidized loan.
Sean, question for you.
Yeah.
So with the student and parent section, are those under one account, or does the student make an account and then the parent makes a separate account?
Yeah, that's a
Great
great
question.
account. That's a great question. So each student and parent would need a student aid account. So the student would go out and complete theirs, wait that verification period. Same thing for a parent. Now, a parent may have one for an older child, so they don't need to create a new one. The student aid accounts are specific to a person, not a task, right? So if I have 2 kids, I am not creating a FSA or a student aid account for child 1 and child 2. A student aid account is specific to a person. So both the parent and the student would need one. Okay. Student's dependency status, right? So this would go through the same questions that were on last year's, right? Are you a ward of the court? Are you an emancipated minor? Are you on the risk of the verge of homelessness, right? All of those questions are still the same. Okay. And it will allow you to check if one of those are what the student needs. Okay. Again, this is what would pop up, as I mentioned, if a parent is unwilling to complete the FAFSA form, this is what they would see in that process, right? Of course, we want parents to be able to help and to provide information towards their student's account. I think that the consent to tax information does a really great job detailing what the use of the tax information for. And the use of the tax information is to allow the student to have some federal student aid for their college expenses. Okay, so it does not, to me, affect a parent at all when it comes to this process. Okay. One of the new things to the upcoming FAFSA are unusual circumstances. Okay. So these would be circumstances that would prevent a student from contacting or being able to contact their parents. Okay. This most likely will be reviewed as a case-by-case scenario at the college level. So it would be a professional judgment. Documentation that could be asked for is going to depend on, what the student is going through. Okay. And again, this is going to be at the college level, not at the federal level. But if you do qualify for an unusual circumstance, you would continue this form as an independent student, obviously, since we wouldn't be able to list parent information. Okay. Parent information. So as Maura mentioned earlier, they're going to have a parent wizard, and the parent wizard is built into the form. So as you can see here, right on the left-hand side, are your parents married to each other? I selected no. Okay, do your parents live together? No. And then it goes through and it's a smart form, right? So if your parents don't live together, it's going to ask which parent provided more financial support for the last 12 months. Okay, when you select yes or no, it would be the parent as Maura said, that provides the most financial support. And then we'll take it a step further to say, well, is that parent remarried? If that parent is remarried, they would have to list the spouse as the other parent on that tax form. So you can kind of see here on the right-hand side, I did it that way. Has the parent you identified in the previous question married? I answered yes. So the information that I am listing is my parent, and then the other parent is that step parent. Okay. So we'll say you have to list that parent, that step parent. But when you go to invite a parent to complete the FAFSA form, you only need to invite one of your parents for now. Okay. And then the other parent can add the information. The parent can then add the other parent's information in the parent section. Okay, so it is, again, the parent wizard is a smart form. So it's going to go through and ask you all the questions needed. What I will say is that, as I mentioned, we do have an student aid account creation video that we will be sending out with this slide deck and the recording, as well as a chart that breaks down which parent will need an FSA ID or a student aid account. Okay, so that will help walk you through it as a dependent student, if the student is an independent student, if the student is a dependent student, but parents are separated, trying to help figure that out as we go. Okay, students' finances, again, if at the very beginning, it will ask a student if they want to consent to the use of their tax information. At that point, they can say yes. If they decline that, it will pop up again in the student finance section. Okay. You would want to make sure that, yes, we are providing consent in that field so that we can be eligible for federal student aid. Okay. The student section, okay, is now complete. So what you're going to see here is you're going to see the status of what you've done. Now, again, there are going to be questions about other questions along the way, but those questions haven't changed from last year. Okay. The student section, when a student completes it, this is what they're going to see. They're going to see you're almost there. You've completed your section. Now it's on to the parent contributors, right? The parents that have to add the information to the student's FAFSA. Okay. At the bottom, you can see the list. It shows you the contributors that you listed, that the student listed, but also, again, you only have to list one. Okay. So that if you only listed mom there, you would only see mom's status. The other thing to keep in mind is, I believe, and Maura, please correct me if I'm wrong, when the student sends out the invitation, the student has 45 days, or the parent has 45 days to complete their section. So there is a timeout period for the form to be completed.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. The nice thing about this too is that you can track the status, right? You can see that the invitation was sent to the parents. Once a parent logs in, the parent can then go to their My Activities and it will say, you have a invitation from Sean. Do you wish to complete this section? All right. And that's where a parent can log in. Now, I'm going to go back to this inviting a parent. As you can see, the parent and other parents section on the right-hand side here, when a student goes through and lists this information, the first name, the last name, the date of birth, and the social security number needs to be the same as the parent. It has to match. Now, I have gotten questions in the past. Well, what about the email address? Maybe they send it to mom's work email, but mom's student aid account is associated with a personal email. That is okay. The email address does not have to match on the invitation, just the personal information for parent and other parent. And again, only one parent needs to be listed. But that is nice to know, because sometimes what the email will look like, and we'll get to that in a second, to what that invite looks like, but that email will just take them to the login page for studentaid.gov. Okay. So I mentioned again, what happens if a student submits the form compared to if a parent completes the form, right? So the last person, the last contributor, whether that be the parent or the student, will have the opportunity to submit the form, right? So if the parent starts it, sends the invitation to the student will then log in, complete their portion, and they are able to submit the FAFSA. If they do it that way, as you can see on this chart here, the student will see the full confirmation page, right? Will show what the student aid index is. It will, if you've seen the congratulations page when you finish the FAFSA, it lists what you could potentially be eligible for, right? Are you eligible for the loan? You should be. If you're eligible for the Pell Grant, what that amount looks like, that will be sent to the student always. It is the students. Remember, it's a role-based form. So the information is always going to flow through the student, okay? If a student starts the form, maybe they started in school with one of you counselors, right? To make sure that they understand it, moving through it well, they submit it, their section, send it to their parents do their section, submit that form. What they will say is congratulations, you've submitted the FAFSA. The FAFSA is complete, okay? But the parent will see limited information because again, it is the student's form, okay? Students will then receive an email that has the same information that the student did when the student was the last one to submit the form. So they will see the student aid index. They will see what they're eligible for when it comes to federal aid. Okay. So the focus this year and moving forward is on the student. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind, and Maura kind of mentioned this, we are going to help the people that come to us, right? Just like you will help the student when they come to you. If a student and a parent come to us for assistance with their FAFSA, we will be able to submit the student form, the student section, and the parent section. Okay. If a parent comes to us and say, hey, we want to do the FAFSA, we are going to sit down and we are going to help that parent do that parent section. Okay. We want to make sure that we're keeping it consistent as to the roles of the form because this is the student's form. Okay. So a little bit more of a breakdown, right? When it comes to if a parent starts the form. So they can start the form and provide a lot of the student's information. Okay. When a student starts, they're doing most of their section. Okay. And then the parent is really just focused on theirs. Okay. Every section can be answered by the parent except for the consent and signature. So the consent for the use of tax information and the signing of the form at the very end. Okay. The parents, when they do the student finance section, they will need to manually provide it. Okay. So that's why sometimes doing the student section first may be easier and then finish with the parent section. Okay. Parent will need to then invite the student. As I mentioned, it would be just like I mentioned at the beginning, if the student starts it, they invite the parents. If the parents start it, they then invite the student. Okay. Again, student will need to create the FSA ID, the student aid account. Okay. Sign in, consent to it, submit that FAFSA to receive that eligibility. Again, that is also if a parent starts the form and then sends it to the student has 45 days to fulfill that invitation, that request. Okay. And then again, by giving consent for both the student taxes and the parent taxes, it will allow a lot more information to not be manually inputted. As we said in the application updates, the questions going from over 100 down to under 40, a big part of that is part of the direct data exchange. Okay. Also keep in mind that that information will not be seen on the FAFSA. It's just going to say, yes, that information was exchanged between the two. Are we good, Karen? Any questions? before I hop into the parent section?
We are good. You're on a roll.
We just have a hand raised, so I wanted to make sure.
I do not see a hand raised. Oh, sorry. Yes, I do. Let me just see. So Alicia has a question. Alicia, I don't know. Can she unmute? I don't think so. Alicia, if you can type your question into the chat or Q&A.
I can allow to talk.
Can it? Let me
Yeah.
see. Oh, she accidentally clicked. You're good, Sean.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure I'm hitting everybody. Okay,
Thank you.
so popping into the parent section. I clicked off of something. Okay, so student has completed their part of their section of the FAFSA. What happens next? Okay, as I mentioned, you invite the parents. What does that process look like? Okay, when you hit submit, that invitation is sent. This is the email that a parent is going to get, right? Help complete the student's FAFSA form. Okay, it will say what they could potentially be eligible for. That login button, again, even if that email is sent to a different email than what is attached to a parent's account, it does not matter, because at the end of the day, when they hit that login button, it's going to take them straight out to studentaid.gov, where they would log in with their student aid account information. Okay, FSA ID, and I apologize if we mentioned this in the beginning, but FSA ID and student aid accounts are one and the same. They're moving away from the FSA ID, so we want to be mindful of that and use student aid accounts. That's what it will be called from the 25-26 academic year and on. Okay, so student aid accounts makes more sense. That's what it is. Okay, so again, this is the email that parents will get once a student completes their section. Or again, if a parent starts the form and invites the student, this is what the student will see on their end as well. Okay. And I think another thing to point out, you also don't have to access the invitation by going through this email. So if a student completes their section and says, you know, hey mom, I completed my section, that mom can just go out and log into studentaid.gov and that information will pop up. So you don't have to go through the email. The email is just a notification of, hey, you have something to do. Maura, one question I'm not sure on, so I'm going to bring you into this is our reminder emails sent in this process if you know, it's a week away and a student hasn't, or a parent hasn't completed their section, or student vice versa? Is there reminder emails that go out to students?
There are, Sean. I can't remember the frequency exactly, but you know, there's one at 1 week, one at 2, that kind of thing. So absolutely, there are reminder emails that go out.
Perfect. I wasn't sure, so I wanted to bring you in.
Sean, question has come in. What happens if one of a student's parents is unreachable?
So I guess it's a sense of what the breakdown is, right? So if that parent is unreachable because they are not in the picture, it sounds like they wouldn't be a contributor to the student's FAFSA. Is that kind of the question that's being asked? So, you know, in a situation of where, you know, parents are separated or were never married, but student resides with the parent 100% of the time because the other parent is not in the picture, we wouldn't need that other parent's information. We would need the parent that is in the picture. I just want to make sure I'm hitting the question to what they're asking. I would think that situation, sorry, I was just reading the additional message. If that's the case, to me, if it's the second parent, it's all going to depend, Laura, and I don't know if you can help me out with that. I think it all depends on what is the marital status and how they file taxes. So if it's a situation where the parents are married, living together, but the parents never around, to me, that would be some type of financial aid appeal, if the parents, let's say, filed taxes jointly. In a situation where they're just out of the picture, it would be the parent that was in the picture that you would be listing.
Absolutely, Sean. And that's actually why they've become more inclusive with situations in which a student can be considered independent. Because sadly, this is the world that we live in now, right? There are situations of human trafficking, of abuse, of parents who physically aren't in the home because of an addiction or because of other issues. So chances are that's not the parent who is then financially supporting the student. So therefore they wouldn't need to be on the FAFSA, but also there are exceptions being made in cases of incarceration, or, in this case, the specific example that was given is a parent who's a homeless drug addict. Absolutely, they are going to work with you on that. Chances are that parent's information would not need to be on there, but if it does, there's going to be a way to work around that.
I think one of the other things just to point out and jump in is, as counselors, certainly you're going to see these situations. And as Maura pointed out, we live in the world we live in right now. When you have these situations arise and you're not really sure how to advise your students, we're certainly there to help you out with this. So, feel free to pick up that phone and give us a call, and, we can even Zoom in with you and your student, as they sit in your office and kind of talk through it a little bit more, get a little bit more background information, and then hopefully we would be able to better advise you and the student as to what they want to do going forward. And, those FAFSA appointments that we have, feel free to have your students sign up for those as well. And we can, Zoom with them, or they can come see us in our office and we'll work with them too.
And, I just reading that last message about this specific case. That would be something to go to the schools about, as kind of Maura and Karen have mentioned. Go to the schools and have the conversation, because again, it is in 2 years ago. So for this FAFSA, you're using 2022 tax information. If in 2022 they were around and now not in the picture, that again is leading to me, a financial aid appeal, because as you mentioned, we don't want it to affect the student's award and what they're eligible for. So I would definitely have that student reach out to, once they start getting accepted, reaching out to the financial aid offices to say, here is my situation, right? And from what I'm seeing is one parent is still in the picture. So the unusual circumstance isn't coming into play for this specific student because there's still a parent in the picture. Okay. But because that other parent is out of the picture, you're going to want to have the student is going to want to have that conversation with the financial aid office to say, yeah, they're technically still married, but I haven't seen or talked to them in forever. And then that's when they'll take them through an appeal process to have it reflect just the one parent that is in the picture. So hopefully that student's aid will be reflective of what their current situation is. Great question. Okay. All right. So, as we kind of saw here, right, you get the email, parent goes to log in. This is what they're going to see once they log into studentaid.gov. Okay, this is, they can accept the invitation, and then it will take them into the student's FAFSA, into that parent section, so that that parent can complete the requirements for the student's FAFSA form. Okay. The one really nice thing, and again, this is because of the rollout of a brand new form. There's going to be confusion. I mean, I know for our New Hampshire folks, you have the changes to the FAFSA as well as that New Hampshire graduation requirement. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of new information. We changed our brand. There's a lot of new information going on in your world. Okay. one of the things I will say, and in all the presentations that we give, is there is a lot of really good information out at the website for students and for parents. Okay. On the right-hand side, what is the FAFSA form? Student Aid does a great job of providing training material, providing videos. They have we have an FSA ID walkthrough or student aid account walkthrough video that we'll be sending you. Student Aid has one. Student Aid has how to use the FAFSA form, what it's going to look like, information needed for the form. On the left-hand side here, right? Parents contributing to the FAFSA form. Now, this was on the last year's FAFSA, previous FAFSAs as well. Okay, but there's a lot of really great information because the form is changing. So they revamped a lot of their toolkits, a lot of their videos, a lot of the documentation that they have to provide as much support to students and parents as needed. Okay, so don't be afraid to go out and review studentaid.gov and see the resources that they have out there for not only families, but for, professionals, you, me, things that we can do to help our students. Okay, again, providing consent, the parent will be asked to provide consent. They must do this in order for the student to be eligible for federal aid. Okay, same thing. If the student doesn't consent, not eligible for student aid. Okay. They will agree at the bottom. So you can see they don't put a lot of emphasis on that decline. They really want you hitting that approve button. Again, we want to make the students eligible for that aid. Okay. So as I mentioned, remarried parents. So if a parent is divorced or separated, it's going to be the parent that provides the most financial support for the student. Okay. If the parent is remarried, right, and maybe the student doesn't know the information for the other parent, the original parent, right, parent one, would be able to provide that information in the parent section. Okay. And again, I think this section, the section in the students portion, that chart that we give out is going to be really beneficial to help determine who needs it so that they are creating those student aid accounts prior to starting the FAFSA form, right? Because we want to make sure those are verified so that when they are going in and logging in, they are just submitting the form once they're in there. Okay. Okay. I did a presentation last week and there were a couple of questions when it came to household size and family size, the difference, right? So household size is now going to turn to family size. So just to take a little bit of, just take a slide here to talk about it a little bit more. Family size is going to be based on tax forms. Now there is going to be a question in the parent section, as you see there, okay, that says, is the information on, is the size of the family different than what is on the tax return? Okay. I think you're going to obviously see this more in a separated household. Sometimes I've heard parents that say, well, one year I list the kids and in the other year, this other parent lists the kids. Okay. So when it comes to financial support, it's not necessarily who has the child, right, on their taxes, but that's why you can update it when you're going through so that if a mom is the one who provides most financial support, but dad listed them on the FAFSA, right, they are able to go in and update that number in this section. Okay. So the parent financial section. So again, most of your questions about the taxes will not appear. Again, you're not going to see the information. I'm not going to see what the AGI is. I'm not going to see, it will not ask, Maura, correct me if I'm wrong, it will not ask you to break down parent one and other parents' income, right? So on the previous form, if you use the data retrieval tool, you still had to list what parent one and parent two made.
You're correct, Sean, that that's not going to be there anymore. Yes.
So that's something that that won't have to be broken down. Okay, so you're really using that consent button to say, yes, I want all of my tax information used. Okay. Again, when a parent completes the form, this is what they're going to see. Okay, it's going to tell you when they completed it, and then it's going to tell you where the information went, right? So usually the confirmation at the end is going to show student aid index. It's going to show your eligibility for grants, loans, things like that. If the parent, remember, it's not the parent's form. Okay, it's the student's form. So the parent will get that information down below, right? An email was sent. Okay, the student will be notified of what they are, that the FAFSA form has been submitted, it is processing, and then the student will also receive the information that they're eligible for. Okay, so again, it is very role specific with a lot of emphasis on that student section. Okay, next steps are provided. And again, if a family submits the FAFSA, let's say January 5th, okay, they're going to receive that confirmation email. But again, that FAFSA submission summary will be available about a month later. Okay, and if for some reason they need to go in and change anything, again, that will be February 1st. Maura, one more question to bring you in on, just to make sure I'm saying the right thing. Even if a student has to update a school listed on their FAFSA, they still need to wait to February 1st, correct? Because that is
You are correct, Sean. I
approved.
can't even guarantee that for you, but I do think you're correct on that one.
That's still a correction in
Correction,
the mind
right.
of the FAFSA of student aid. So even if a student, remember, they can list 20 schools, be mindful of that up front. But again, if they're doing it nice and early, they won't be able to add an additional school until that FAFSA submission summary is available to them. All right, and Maura.
All right. So we're just going to give you a couple of exciting scholarship resources. But before we do that, I actually was thinking as Sean was talking that we've spoken to many financial aid professionals over the past few months. And there have been a few requests like, hey, when you talk to counselors, when you talk to families, can you make sure? So I just want to pass some of that along to you folks. If you are sitting down with a student to help them create their account, couple of things. One, we realize many high school students don't know their social security number, and they will need to have that in order to do absolutely anything. So making sure that the student has access to their social security number, but also that the name needs to be exactly as it appears on the social security card. So that's no matter who's setting up an account, whether it's for the student, whether it's for the parent. Sometimes you dig out that little blue card that you haven't looked at in years and people realize there's a typo on it. Or with a parent, maybe you've been using your married name for 15 years and you changed it on your taxes, but not on your social security card. This all goes through social security. So it has to be done exactly as it is on that social security card. So just to kind of start out on the right foot, if you are helping a student, make sure that they have access to their social security number and know how their name appears on their social security card. So now let's talk about where we
Can
can
I
get.
just
Yes.
interrupt you for 1 second? Could you also just briefly touch on the process for, one of my heavy territories is Manchester. Can you touch a little bit on the process for maybe a new American student whose parents may not have social security numbers? What does that look like, and what do we know? Right, I think we're still in a transition period of not knowing what that process is going to look like, but can you just touch on that in case that question comes up?
Sure. And obviously very kind of loaded question, loaded conversation, a lot to it, a lot of layers. So if a student has a social security number or an alien registration number, student or parent, they can create their studentaid.gov account with that. There will now be a process for people who do not have social security numbers to create an FSA ID. For students who are not, let's see, if they are an eligible non-citizen, they could still get some federal financial aid. But if not, there is a way to create an FSA ID, but it hasn't yet caught up that those students would be eligible for financial aid. But if it is a parent going on there and you need the parent information, couple of things. There will be a way for them to create their ID. It will just be, there'll be a set of questions for them to answer instead of doing the match through the Social Security Administration. They'd be answering other questions. Another thing to point out, and this comes up all the time with undocumented families and things like that, people nervous about going on a federal form. If you do read the fine print on the federal website, it will say that information collected for the FAFSA is only going to be used in order to determine that student's eligibility for financial aid. That information does not go anywhere else from there. And so that is in the fine print. But there will be a way for parents without social security numbers to create an FSA ID to sign off on students. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Popped into my head.
So exciting news from us. And again, part of our name change is just really being committed to the Granite State and literally giving everything we've got in terms of free resources and kind of putting our money where our mouth is in this case. Our scholarship program last year awarded $300,000 to current New Hampshire residents that were already in college. This year, we're going to have $500,000. Very exciting. But also the scholarship will be open to students who are graduating high school and starting college. We are not entirely sure what that is going to look like, but because we had that exciting news, we wanted to make sure that we give it to you and that you have it as a scholarship resource. We will be reaching out again as soon as we have more information, but what we want you to know is that we have $500,000 to give to New Hampshire residents who will be seeking higher education next year. And we will fill you in when we have the details. And New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. And if you've ever been to one of our presentations, you know, and you know, a lot of your local scholarships may certainly flow through there as well. But they give out more than $7 million a year. I think it was closer to $8 million last year. Again, to New Hampshire residents attending college. So we want to just make sure to keep them in the forefront of, you know, certainly that is a big question we get from families. What about scholarships? Where do we look for scholarships? So we wanted to make sure, give you a couple places to start.
And then we'll wrap it up with, does anyone have any questions?
3 minutes to spare, Sean. I'm so impressed.
Kept checking the clock. I was like, we can do it.
Lots of messages coming in. Amazing information. I'm excited for the slides and video. Great news about the scholarships. Thanks so much. So again, just to reiterate what Sean mentioned at the beginning, she's going to be sending everybody copies of the slides as well as a link to the recording. That may take a day or two for us to get that up on our website to actually, you know, to have that live on our website, but we'll give you a link where you can get to that as well. And more goodies. She has lots of goodies that she's going to be sending you all. So
and don't be afraid to send them out to your students, your families, put them in newsletters. They are available for you, available for them.
Last great question just came in and I want to make sure we get this answered. Do students need to be residents of New Hampshire or just attend high school in New Hampshire for Granite Advanced Scholarship?
So that's a great question. So I think it's dependent on typically is a New Hampshire resident. I do know that last year when I was up at Rivendell, which is an interstate school, we would accept Vermont residents if they attended that school. If it is a question regarding VLAX, I also believe we can. I would just want to run it by our AVP to make sure that is true. But those are the two schools where I've gotten that ask. If we work with them, we want to make it available to those students. But yes, the requirement is a New Hampshire resident. And again, a lot of questions we get from parents too is, well, are these available, New Hampshire charitable and then the Granite Advance, are they available to take anywhere? And the answer is yes. If you are a New Hampshire student studying outside the state of New Hampshire, you are still eligible for both of those scholarships.
Thanks, Sean.
And there was a question in the chat as well about the graduation requirement in New Hampshire. We do have a lot of great resources for that and for everything FAFSA this year. If you go to our website, there is a FAFSA toolkit, and there you can get a copy of the waiver, more information about the graduation requirement. If you just want to sit and chat through it with somebody, we would be more than happy to chat with you as well. So just reach out.
Thanks, Maura, for catching that. I was in the chat and not the Q&As. Lots of thank yous coming in. Thank you all for being with us. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And let me just make sure that there's no more questions. I'm going back and forth. Sorry. Lots of thank yous, like I said. I think we've got them.
All right, then I will say thank you for taking your lunch break to take a listen to updates, take a little walkthrough of the FAFSA form. If you have questions as they come up, don't be afraid to reach out to us. If you can, fill out that feedback. We would love to hear any questions that may not have been touched or things that are on your mind so that we can provide these types of series to you guys. So anything that's on your mind, please share, let us know so that we can work for you guys, right? Help you through this crazy transition.